Well, still having our conversation on the Gulf of Guinea, which has one of the highest of the world's natural deposits. And it's not any wonder why criminal gangs have decided to make home that region. But again, the continent, as well as countries in Europe, like Denmark, they're making moves to seeing that these criminals are pushed back. Welcome to VSA. I'm Sulaiman. You know, the Gulf of Guinea has seen increased criminal activities in the past few years, with 2020 particularly testing the main players the most. Now, with the abduction of 135 seafarers at sea and 84 attacks on ships just last year alone, it is the most dangerous waterway to ply in the world, yet arguably the most resourceful. Now, fishing companies, oil exploration firms of global reputation and national governments have all had a feel of the devastation. Now, shipping companies are not left out in the heat as piracy and armed robbery at sea increases even in the presence of improved patrol and security in the Gulf of Guinea. Nations affected have devised a common security architecture that will protect them against future occurrences, but the boys, now that's the criminals, and not relentless, making the waters a difficult channel to pass through or earn a living from. Now, the challenges are enormous beyond what any nation can hold and needs a collection of ideas to tackle. The Gulf of Guinea is also a drug trafficking route that is frequented by some of the biggest drug groups in the world. Diverse, hydra-hided, multiple, enormous, huge, and difficult. The problems of security on the Gulf of Guinea will require a holistic transnational approach, and that is why we're keeping a conversation here on your Central VSA. Tamunokuro Obietonbara, a writer and founder, Africa Sankofa 360, and Professor Macharia Munene, Professor of History and International Relations, join me on the square today. Gentlemen, good to see both of you. Professor Munene, I'm excited seeing you again. Thank you for having time to join us all the way.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Well, let's start with you, Professor Munene. You know, earlier on, we started this conversation. We've had experts talking about why almost every criminal is looking towards the Gulf of Guinea. But it doesn't look like Africa is doing enough to push back these criminals out of where we'll call water of immense abundance.
It does look as if Africa as a whole has a problem with what we may call criminals. And right now, the Gulf of Guinea would appear to be the hotspot, the piracy capital of the world at present. But before we insist on that argument, we look at the whole area, the Gulf of Guinea, the 6,000 kilometers of the coastline that is very rich, fertile, and the resources full. And what we notice in that long coastline, apart from the resources available, it is an area of extraction, resource extraction from Africa to some other places. That has been the continuing record. And from being an area of resource extraction to external places, it has been turned into an ecological disaster. And what we have going on is a reaction to the ecological disaster, which in part is to be blamed on the governments that appeared to be incapable of protecting their environment, particularly the Niger Delta, which is very rich with oil and gas, whether onshore or offshore. And when it became clear that the extraction of oil and gas, instead of benefiting people, it was destroying the environment, with all that oil spill. It's been estimated about 11, 12 million barrels of oil have been in the region, which has killed fish, it killed the vegetation, it made people sick, and there had been no solutions. The corporate entities, the big oil companies that were extracting, initially were not about what they were going through, at least from what we can tell. The first major oil spill in 1979, 1980. And because before then there may have been some oil spills, but they were not noticeable. And then from there you have that movement, the Ogoni movement, represented by Ken Saro-Wiwa. And the whole matter started becoming public, not just in Nigeria, but throughout the world. And then from there, you have grievances that people are hurting and nothing is being done to rectify the situation so that their livelihood is protected. When that appeared to be the case, then it appeared legitimate for people to express themselves in very forceful ways, and expressing themselves, it turned out that initially they were listening, some people paid attention, but it also became an opportunity for criminals to take advantage of the whole thing. Piracy seems to have gained in prominence, and actually very interesting is not just that particular place, but it looks as if in the early 90s, piracy was becoming the in thing, whether it is in the Gulf of Aden, whether it is in the African coast, even the Gulf of Mexico and the Asia. It looks as if, particularly at the end of the war, piracy looked as if it was the in thing for both people with grievances and criminals. Now, what has happened since then? Piracy was contained, or seemed to have been contained in Eastern Africa, seemed to have been reduced in the Gulf of Aden, and there is a little activity in the Gulf of Mexico, but the main activity is in the Gulf of Guinea, which then becomes a very point of concern. Which raises the question, whose responsibility is it? It is, yes, the responsibility of the countries in the Gulf of Guinea. And there was an attempt in 2013, the creation of the Yaoundé Code of Conduct, in which they are supposed to cooperate and help each other, which they don't do very well, in part because there are management issues, suspicion, and disparities in terms of ability. So the countries of the Gulf of Guinea have a responsibility. But those forces that do extract and take the oil and the gas and the fish and to other countries also have a major responsibility, which they might have neglected previously. So the need for synchronizing the 2 points of sources of responsibility is very high. And there does not appear to be willingness, particularly on the extracting forces, to be involved as much as they should in containing the situation. But one way of containing the situation, apart from dealing with the criminals, is really to address the ecological challenge.
Absolutely. Let me come in here quickly, Professor. Thank you very much for taking time to take us through history, even getting into the Ogoni crisis, which also, brought Nigeria into a very bad light with the killing of Ken Saro-Wiwa. Let me come in quickly to Tamunokuro. Tamunokuro, I guess you can hear me. Good to see you back again.
I can hear you.
Yeah, great. Listening to Professor Munene, he said quite a lot, and some of those key things he raised point to your region of Nigeria, talking about degradation and some agitation that also led to militancy, which also caused some kind of friction across the Gulf of Guinea. Take us through what it is like at the moment. How is it security-wise, looking at that region from your side of the continent down into the deep shores? How has it been like in terms of managing security across the Gulf?
Thank you so much. This issue as it pertains to the Gulf of Guinea affects me personally because in 2017, my elder brother, Precious, that was his name, was murdered while fighting with some of the people that brought in oil to illegally refine in my hometown. I'm actually from a place called Okrika in Rivers State, and so it affects me personally. Sometimes when I go home, I see that the people in my town they find it difficult going to fishing because the environment is polluted, and so you can understand why the people had to take up arms, the Niger militants. I am not here to defend militancy of any kind. I'm not here, to defend acts of violence. But when you are from the region where I am from, and you see what is going on in terms of the economic exploitation, in terms of the degradation and the pollution of the environment, then you will see why these things will happen, because the government itself has failed to address the economic issues, and also the oil companies. They just take without really doing anything in terms of economic empowerment for the people. Now, talking about the Gulf and the insecurity, I think that it is important that we go back to the basics. We should go back to what has really affected the Gulf of Guinea in the last 500 years. Now, I read a report the other day that states that the Gulf of Guinea has become the most dangerous maritime zone in the world, and I can't help but disagree with that statement, because it said that this was just in the last 10 years. If we go back to history, we will see that the Gulf of Guinea has been the most dangerous maritime zone in the last 500 years. I say this because in 1444 AD, when Portugal kidnapped the first set of Africans, that is 235 African people, and they shipped them through the Gulf of Guinea and supplied them in Europe as slaves, beginning the economic system that will be known as capitalism, because capitalism started with African people. African people were the first capital. So African people were used to usher in the economic system we know today as capitalism. And in a course of 250 years, 12,000 ships embarking on 40,000 voyages, carrying millions and millions and millions of African people through the Gulf of Guinea to be supplied in Europe. Today, as we are having this conversation, it is estimated that there are over 1 million African people at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. So the crisis in the Gulf of Guinea did not start today. It started over 500 years ago. So we cannot talk about what is happening today without talking about the basics, the foundation of the crisis as it affects the Gulf of Guinea. Now, in terms of security, yes, the government is putting measures in place, but that's not enough. You cannot just send in the military without, addressing the economic issues that are causing these attacks. And also, there are actually some insinuations in some quarters. Some people are actually saying that some of these attacks are not just carried out by angry people, angry youths, from the coastal regions. That there are some international backings to it. I was reading a report that also states that that there are some of these, private military contractors, some nations as well, they have to create the need so that they can provide the solution. They create the demand and then make the supply. in terms of the insecurity, because right now most of the private military companies are making so much money by providing security for the ships that are going through to the Gulf of Guinea. And so I think that if we are looking at this issue as it involves the Gulf of Guinea, we have to look at it holistically and understand what is going on. Yes, there are local concerns that are giving rise to insecurity, but there are also insinuations in some quarters that there are some international backings to this thing. I was reading a report also that a report by the Chatham House. This was cited by the former UN, by the former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Michelle Sisson, where she said that Nigeria loses around $1.5 billion every month as a result of the insecurity in the Gulf of Guinea. $1.5 billion.
But again, let me weigh in here, because if you listen to Professor Munene, he said something about the continent's leadership. He said they pretend, or they seem to be, more like a pretense. There's like an attempt, which is not enough. Professor Munene, I want you to expatiate more on that and also take us through some of those things raised by Tamunokuro here, because he's gone down history, and that's your area of forte, and perhaps you should weigh in there. Is it likely, is there a nexus between, the slave trade business and what we're seeing at the moment across the Gulf of Guinea? Professor Munene.
Yes, there is a connection there. That's why I started by saying that the Gulf of Guinea is a zone of extraction. And the first resources that were extracted for roughly 300 years were the human resources, the human capital that created the transatlantic slave trade and the foundations of capitalism as we know it. And I think Friend is right to say that the Africans were the first capital in that connection. That extraction in itself was a process of underdevelopment. The whole of the Guinea, Gulf of Guinea was underdeveloped through that human extraction. The next phase in that extraction was now the colonialism itself, in which exploitation and enslavement was in situ. And there you have all the resources, whether it was rubber, whether it was gold, cocoa, minerals that were just pulled out to go and benefit other places. That exploitation was part of the colonial establishment. It is in that context then that we have the issue of the oil coming up in Nigeria from about 1908, when they started exploring, finding some interesting things. But it was in 1956 when they struck some substantive amount of oil, and in 2 years they were exporting 5,000 barrels. And within 20 years, they were exporting 2.4 million barrels of oil in that short time. The companies that were exploiting started with Shell, then others were put in, and when they appeared to be competing to exploit the oil in the area, they were paying little attention to environmental damage or what it was doing to the people. I may add here that the oil crisis of the 1970s, following the Yom Kippur War, might have had something to do with this accelerated desire to find more and more oil from a safer area, which Nigeria appeared to be when it was compared to the Middle East. So the accelerated exploitation of the oil, of the gas, with the spillover, unlimited spillover, and the flare-up, the gas flare-up that was burning up the environment and things of that. So when they were added up together, the hat was big. So from 1979 and 1980, people see that there is a connection between the extraction of the oil and the gas and the deprivation of the environment, the ecological disaster, and that ecological disaster turning out to be human disaster because people are dying, people are devastated, and there was no concern that was coming from the extractive forces. And the tragedy, one of the tragedies of this was that the government of Nigeria and the neighboring countries, particularly Nigeria, did not seem to care about what was going on, which seemed to justify the rise of the militants in demanding what, and they started saying they not only want some cut from the money, they start talking about some sort of independence or autonomy, getting more say in what happened. And so you had the rise of some of those militias, like MEND or the NDA, and it turned out that some of the leaders of the MEND and the NDA were having enough money that they could buy patrol boats or gunboats from Norway. And so it is not just that people at the Niger Delta are doing it, there's that connection with the suppliers, because as they were getting money, either through ransom demands or whether it were through bunkering and then trying to sell the oil in the strange places. And it developed in such a way that it is a tragedy in Nigeria, that a country that started with about several oil refineries that seem to be doing well for a while, now ends up looking as if it imports its own oil, which is a result, one would say, of mismanagement and bad governance, and also irresponsibility on part of the extracting forces in Europe and America and other places, and also the people who are entrusted with running the affairs of state in the area.
Let me bring in Tamunokuro. I'll come back to you, Professor Munene, so that we can actually, expand that, submission you just gave. Tamunokuro, we'll come back to your region now. And what readily comes to mind is what Professor Munene has highlighted, you inclusive, talking about, the agitation that has actually led to deprivation, degradation, exploitation, and of course, devastation to a lot of people in that region. But again, this is 2021. Has anything changed?
Nothing has changed. Things have gotten worse. I think if you take a tour to the Niger Delta, maybe you can start off from my own place, which is Okrika. Take a tour, go over there, look at the impact of what the exploitation and the extraction of the resources is doing to the environment. A couple of years ago, I went to my own to my village, and then in a bit to create awareness, to inform the world of what was going on, and I saw that now. I'm not indicting the military, okay? I'm not indicting the military. I know that there are some good officers of the military doing their job, but also the military cannot claim ignorance as to what is actually going on, because I also saw with my eye that some of the military personnel in the region are also participating in the illegal oil trade, which is really affecting the environment. The point I'm trying to make is that nothing has changed. When you go, you will see the environment is hugely polluted. People can go fishing. There are no jobs for the people in the region. Over 70, 80% of young men and women are not employed. So what like I said, I'm not justifying any of the acts of violence, but it is not enough to send in the military. It is not enough to say, okay, this has to stop. We want security in the Gulf of Guinea without addressing the economic situation. There must be economic empowerment. Like I stated earlier, according to a report by the Chatham House, Nigeria is losing 1.5. This was in 2016. I don't know if the figures have changed, but Nigeria, as of 2016, was losing $1.5 billion. as a result of the insecurity in the Gulf of Guinea. So that is a huge amount of money. And so if the government really want to make the Gulf of Guinea safe, I think that the economic situation should be addressed first. The people should be empowered economically before we can look at other ways, maybe using force.
Tamuno, let me stay with you on this. What about the locals? How do they view these problems, especially in the creeks? Are they in support or against what the people are doing? Because look at it this way, the government, according to you, isn't actually helping to salvage the situation. And you also have your people, who are also in the business of breaking some of these pipelines, causing pollution, again, to their environment. So it goes a long way in finding solutions to the problems bedeviling that particular axis.
The problem is actually a multifaceted one. That's why I say we have to look at it with a very holistic view. It's multifaceted. Yes, it is like knowing that, okay, this is poison, but you're hungry, you have no option, you're going to eat it. It's not going to kill you immediately, but it will kill you over time. But because you're so hungry, there is no option for you, you still go ahead and eat it. I think that is what is going on in the Niger Delta. Yes, I know people, I have relations that have died from this. Like I told you earlier, my own elder brother, he left a wife and 3 children. He died in 2017 while confronting the people that brought in this ship of crude to refine, because they have a way of refining locally. There are so many local refineries. So they brought it, and some of the members of the community, alongside my elder brother, went and confronted them to say, you can't do this here, you're going to pollute our environment. So in the midst of having this back and forth fighting, trying to chase them away with the oil vessel, my elder brother was killed in the process. This was in 2017. So the locals really are not in support of this, because the environment is really affected. But of course, there are some people that are in support, not just some of the elite locals, even some of the security officials are also a part of this. So addressing the issue in the Gulf, we need, like I say, a holistic approach.
Let me come in here. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to butt you in there, but what this means is that we'll go on a short, break. When we come back, we'll be looking at solutions. Professor Munene, Tamunokuro, both of you will be weighing in on possible solutions, how to help that region, how to help the Gulf of Guinea, and it will seem as if that has become the world's free crime zone. That's when we return. Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching Village Square Africa here on News Central Television. And of course, we're looking at issues surrounding the Gulf of Guinea. And as you know, the Economic Community of West African States, that's ECOWAS, arguably the most affected in the region, set up an integrated maritime security in 2019 just to improve security and safety in the Gulf of Guinea. This is to step up law enforcement and governance frameworks, capacity, as well as implementation. Cross-border maritime operations involving the private sector, as well as civil societies, were also top of the discourse. Other than kidnapping, oil theft and armed robbery at sea, illegal fishing, and the depletion of nature, as highlighted by Professor Munene on these waters, are a cause for concern. Even the fishing communities across the Gulf of Guinea have also been identified as a part of the solutions, as they see and know many of these criminals. But again, Tamunokuro has also said that locals there have found it very difficult, because some of those who have, been able to be so audacious to dare these criminals have had to pay with their lives. And that's where we are at the moment. And now bringing back Professor Munene and Tamunokuro This is about solution. Before that break, Professor Munene, I asked a question. Does it now look like the Gulf can be described as the world's free crime zone?
That's an interesting terminology, implying that criminals are free to commit their crimes and get away with it. And get away with it in part because they have the support of very powerful forces, both international and local. It can be said that way, but it is not a concept that should be encouraged.
Absolutely.
To think of an area as a crime-free zone, not crime-free, but an area for criminal freedom to be done. But now looking at the possible solutions, suggested solutions, this is a global challenge. It's not just a Gulf of Guinea problem. It is a global problem in the sense that the environmental degradation has a way of going beyond the region where it is. So one of the things that should be considered is how they can mount a cleanup, the environmental cleanup, so as to return the area into agricultural productivity, livelihoods can be restored. And once that is done, we can expect the desperation of the people to engage in those unbecoming behavior going down. As for criminals, these are criminals. And it does not matter what you do, they will still commit the crime because it is in their nature to be a criminal. Those then can be dealt with through the cooperation of international law enforcement organs. But then the problem might come up that the people who may have to be arrested are themselves the ones who are supposed to enforce the law. It's a complicated matter. So my way of looking at it would be to see whether effort can be made to restore the environment, particularly in the Delta area, such that the people can get their livelihoods back. It's not enough to say that they get a few dollars here or nairas there or there. No, that will not do. There needs to be a major concerted effort, and it is not just a Nigerian or West African problem, it is a world problem. And then the corporates, the big oil companies that are making the money and shipping all these things, they have to be held responsible. And in fact, they should be expected to pump in a lot of resources in the cleanup, because in the cleanup, then it will reduce the tensions amongst the people. They will not have as many grievances if the environment is better, if the land is cultivatable again, if the waters have the fish they need. The Delta has a very elaborate water system, but it's all contaminated. So how to get it back so that fishermen can do their fishing and not worry about some other things. Then if that is done, we can consider that those are the options that need to be taken into account, but they all should be taken into account as a global undertaking.
Let me run along with the cleanup, which you just highlighted, Professor Munene. Tamunokuro, listening to Professor Munene, what readily comes to mind is the cleanup, plan by the government and Shell for the region, Okrika inclusive, and has that started at the moment, knowing full well that after the court judgment, there was an attempt and a mandate by the government of Nigeria to clean up the region. So tell us what exactly is happening at the moment in terms of that exercise.
Talking about cleanup, I started laughing, because it's now almost sounding like a joke. We keep hearing so much money being earmarked for the cleanup of the Niger Delta, starting from Ogoni and so on, but we never get to see it. We don't even know what happened to the monies they keep budgeting for the cleanup. But what I know for certain is that no cleanup is going on. There has been no cleanup. The environment is the way it is. As a matter of fact, it has even gotten worse. That's why I'm saying take a tour, go to visit the Niger Delta, take a tour to the Niger Delta, and you will see for yourself, that they have not done anything. They just come on every day talking about cleanup. I think they are turning it into some kind of campaign slogan. They want to get that into the heart of the people because they understand what this means to the people. So they say, oh, if you vote for us, if you come into power, we are going to clean up the environment, And the point is nothing is going on. The environment is as it is. No cleanup has started. And to add to what the professor said, I think that there has to be sincerity from the government. The government, it's for me, they're paying lip service. And because there is really no sincerity on their part, we are not feeling the impact. So I think that there has to be sincerity. If we want to, Nigeria is affected. I think that the insecurity in the Gulf affects Nigeria more than it affects, any other country in the Gulf region. So I think that the Nigerian government should really be sincere in addressing these issues. They are very fundamental to our economy, and they should be sincere. But so far, no cleanup is going on. The environment has gotten worse, and things are the way they are.
Tamunokuro, there's been allegations that sometimes those who live around that axis and even crews and members are also those who give information to the attackers. What can you tell us about that?
Well, criminals, wherever they are, they work, as syndicates, and criminals will always have their informants. That doesn't mean the locals, as a whole, is informing the criminals. The average person in the Niger Delta region just wants to have a peaceful life. I don't think that the average Niger Deltan wants to involve himself or herself in any kind of violence or criminal activities. But then there are criminals, and so criminals, they always have a way of getting the information. This has nothing to do with the locals. It's like I said, it's international. We should, in as much as we're looking at the local side of this, we should also understand that it has an international dimension to it. So we shouldn't neglect the international aspect of the insecurity, and now it is benefiting some people, across the world. The insecurity is benefiting some people across the world. We know that. So we shouldn't neglect that. We shouldn't just focus on what's happening with the locals and how some angry Niger Deltan youths have taken up arms and have turned to violence. We shouldn't just focus on that. We should also
let me bring in Professor Munene here to weigh in, sort of button there. Professor Munene, some of the key things you've raised amounts to leadership, having to show some will to moving in and securing that region. Talking about the Gulf. At the moment, do you think the African states across the Gulf have the potential to be able to police the Gulf, knowing full well that some countries have moved in from Europe and they're doing well protecting their various interests, whether they're, ship, whether they're businesses, but African countries, do they have that same, muscle to police the Gulf?
They do have the potential. The potential is always there. The challenge is to realize that potential. And that's where the question of leadership comes in, that we do have some countries that have very weak leadership, even if they are big. Still the leadership is wanting in terms of focus, in terms of commitment, in terms of clarity, as to what needs to be done. And some of them are even doubtful as to what the national interests of their own countries are. So the leadership is a question here. And that commitment from one country to another does need to come together. Whether it's Benin, Togo, Nigeria, Cameroon, and Ghana, they need to get their acts together and say what is it that they can do and mean it, not just talk about it. But they agree that they need to do, first of all, they promote the security agenda and also do the cleaning up, which I talked about, and say that it is not a regional issue alone. It's a world issue, that if there is that sincerity, commitment, then it can be done. It is not an overnight thing. It is a long-term project, which will require resources, both human, intellectual, and material.
Now, you know, Professor, let me also come in here quickly. This is also to you, Professor Munene. You know, countries, you know, fear anyone making any kind of incursion into its sovereignty. Do you think that these countries that you've just named across the Gulf, Togo, Benin, Nigeria, do you think that there's this fear of losing its sovereignty or losing, you know, some kind of, you know, policy information that may slip out? So how do they say it in the AU, brother nation?
Well, I think the concern about sovereignty may be far-fetched, in the sense that when the survival of the countries in that region is the issue, then coming together to protect themselves collectively and ensure that they do not all disappear under the mark of oil spills and environmental degradation. It makes little sense to say that cooperating to deal with a serious problem is losing sovereignty, because that's wacky thinking. And there is need to, what you have raised now is the necessity of rethinking interest, rethinking sovereignty, rethinking self-defense or regional defense. And if they all do this, I doubt whether they will all do it, but should they do it or agree to do it, then they'll be making a step forward. Because if something is wrong in Nigeria, Cameroon gets affected, Togo gets affected, Benin gets affected. It is in their common interest to address this common danger, as opposed to being secluded. And sometimes those who are secluded that way, you take properly, they are getting advice from Europe, not from fellow Africans. And if they are getting the advice and guidance from Europe, they cannot be talking about sovereignty when they are not in charge of their own thinking. There's a problem with that kind of thing. So the African countries in the region and the leadership in particular would need to rethink exactly what's going on in their countries, in their region, and find that commonality that will strengthen them in order to eliminate this scourge that is systematically destroying the region. So they can do it.
So, Tamunokuro, quickly here, what do you expect now from the government of Nigeria and the people in the Niger Delta as to, you know, starting a healing process, which in this case will mean a cleanup, as Professor Munene is, you know, highlighted. The first thing first is to bring in the region back to normalcy so that everyone can start living a normal life.
Before I respond to that, I want to quickly say that I would, you know, respectfully disagree with the professor. I do not think that the issue pertaining to losing the sovereignty of the African nations that are within the Gulf of Guinea is far-fetched. I don't think that it is something that is implausible. I think it is something that is likely to happen. Now, last year, March of 2020, the U.S. Navy organized the biggest military games in the Gulf of Guinea. I think it involves 32 nations, if I'm not getting it wrong now, but they came together. That was in March of 2020, and the U.S. Navy organized the largest military games. And like I said, there are insinuations in some quarters that the insecurity, that is why I keep saying that we shouldn't just focus on what's happening as it pertains to the locals. There is an international dimension to this. There are insinuations in some quarters that there are international sponsors to the crisis we are having in the Gulf of Guinea. Now, we know that that France and some of the European countries are moving their vessels, patrolling the Gulf of Guinea. Some of the things that are being said, some of the insinuations is that these people are looking for the excuse as to move into the Gulf and occupy the Gulf of Guinea permanently. So these are not just sayings that are far-fetched. These are not just, I understand what the professor is saying. We can actually do this if we are sincere, if African nations, if African governments are sincere, African governments that are within the Gulf of Guinea, if they are sincere to address the issues of insecurity by first of all tackling the economic problems, then of course it can be addressed. But there is a loophole. And so it is very easy for the security to be hijacked and to give the excuse as to why the Gulf of Guinea will be occupied by foreign forces. So these are not just things that are.
But again, as you said, this fear is based on insinuation, is unfounded. No proof to it.
Like they say, there is an element of truth in every conspiracy, theory, but I wouldn't want to call this conspiracy because I've seen it. I've seen the impact. I've seen foreign naval ships that are patrolling the Gulf, and if care is not taken, they will be there permanently. Now we know about the U.S. African Command, which is called the AFRICOM, and they are also looking for ways of occupying the Gulf of Guinea. So these things are not implausible. These are not just far-fetched, or these are not just bizarre insinuations.
Let me let Professor Munene react to that in a minute so that we can wind down. Tamunokuro, thank you. Professor Munene.
Yes, it is true. And that's one of the concerns that I have about extracontinental forces determining what happens in the African continent. That's a concern. And what I was saying is for the African countries, those in the Gulf of Guinea, coming together in their own interest to figure out how best to address the challenges before them. The environmental degradation, the criminalities, the suspicions, and the different defense aspects of it. He mentioned about the naval games that the U.S. has been playing around there. It plays a lot of naval games almost everywhere in the world. And those games, I'm sure, those African countries were part and parcel of it, in theory, if not in reality, for them to take place. Nigeria was part of that game. But my emphasis was on the African countries themselves.
Absolutely. I think you've made that point so clear right now, Professor Munene. I'd like to thank both of you here for being such a nice company. And in any case, Professor Munene, some of the key things you raised here about those African countries is what Nigeria and these other countries are dealing with. Remember when the issue of climate change started affecting the pastoral farmers, the herders, at the moment, it's gone across these other countries, Togo, Ghana, Benin, and of course, Nigeria. Security at sea is not any different. It's as important as security on the land. So the sovereignty of nations depends on how well they protect their waters. So it is essential that nations in the Gulf of Guinea, as both of you have highlighted, protect their waters against incursion that may go on to threaten not just their country's economy, but their existence. Many thanks again for being such a nice company, Tamunokuro, Obietonbara, and Professor Munene. To our viewers, many thanks for watching across the continent. See you again tomorrow. I'm Sulaiman.